Football fans tend to use the term game manager to describe a quarterback who is almost a net neutral influence on the field, basically belittling a quarterback who they feel is just out there to not turn the ball over, throw simple checkdowns, hand off the ball without fumbling, and maybe make the occasional touchdown pass. A quarterback who won't win you games based on his play alone, but also shouldn't lose you games. Not a franchise guy, but not a bum. Think Trent Dilfer, John Kitna, and some would even go as far as to say Terry Bradshaw. So today I want to talk about what really makes a game managing quarterback and why the term shouldn't be used as an insult. Obviously, no criteria can be so perfect that it includes every player that you would consider a game manager, and this is also my opinion. So not to be rude or anything, but this is my video, so I will state my opinion. So first, let me establish what I think the meaning of game manager is. I don't think it's an insult or it should be used to put down a quarterback. But obviously being a game manager doesn't make you a great, amazing quarterback who's winning MVPs. You aren't getting named to all-pro teams or, best quarterback or anything like that. At most, you make a few Pro Bowls here and there. The job of a game managing quarterback is to not turn the ball over and complete more passes than you don't, and also to ride the ship and help improve the morale of your teammates and just be a good locker room guy along with that. A game managing quarterback needs to be able to know the offense very well and have a decently high football IQ to make the right plays at the right time. You probably aren't slinging the football 30 yards for completions downfield, but you are a great 5 to 10 yard passer. You aren't really going to elevate the play of guys around you amazingly, but they can help elevate yours. Obviously, this criteria isn't set in stone and exceptions are made, but I feel like this describes what you want in a game manager. But determining what QBs are game managers and what ones are journeymen is tough. Like how most would say Ryan Fitzpatrick was a journeyman and Doug Williams was a game manager. Despite Fitzpatrick's stats lining up with that of a game manager, but this is because Doug Williams typically could limit turnovers and he helped the Washington Redskins win a Super Bowl. Whereas Fitz led the NFL in interceptions once and has never even played a game in the playoffs. The two main things that set a game manager and a journeyman apart is that a game manager helps teams win for the most part and doesn't tend to be on a new team every year. Just going through the list of Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, you will find some of the greatest game managing quarterbacks of all time. Joe Namath, Bob Greasy twice, Terry Bradshaw 4 times, Jim Plunkett twice. I know some of those guys you might think aren't game managers, but when it comes to quarterbacks in the 60s to the 80s, a lot of the better ones were game managers just because their offense had a great running game that they relied on, and due to that, the quarterbacks took a back seat. And that really happened league-wide, so a lot of these guys are Hall of Famers and All-Pros and MVPs, but that's just because the rest of the quarterbacks were playing a similar style and teams weren't throwing the ball as much, so compared to today's stats, it just doesn't look as good. So looking at those guys now, they look like game managers because really that was their main job, while most of these teams had a really good running back that they mainly relied on. But still, they helped their team win when it mattered, and really that's what matters. Now, plenty of game managers haven't won Super Bowls, but they still led some pretty great playoff runs and provided great playoff moments. Like when Matt Hasselbeck said,
"Heads it's called."
Look at him, he's laughing.
Heads! Seattle has won the toss.
We won the ball, we're going to score.
That moment against the Packers is one of the most iconic ones in NFL playoff history, and it came from a top-tier game manager. But what makes a game manager so special? Why do we have debates on who is and who isn't a game manager? Well, because being a game manager is important. Why use a guy as a gunslinger and just let him throw 25 interceptions every year when you could utilize him in a more efficient way with less turnovers, more completions, and maybe even an improved perception of that quarterback? But game managers can fall off hard and go from loved to hated. A guy like Ryan Tannehill has gone from a player people were calling a bust in Miami, then he made it a Pro Bowl his first year in Tennessee and became one of the most feel-good stories in football. Then in 2020, most would say Tannehill graduated from the title of game manager with a 33 touchdown and 7 interception season, and now, after regressing the past few seasons, is becoming disliked. It's a crazy roller coaster ride, but that's what happens when you are a game manager. You aren't untouchable, you are very replaceable the moment you start to play bad, and you aren't given the leeway of a star quarterback because you haven't earned that title. But it's not all bad. Game managers can also become loved by an entire fan base for most, if not all, of their career. The fans still look up to you in a way. It's almost like you're a blue-collar quarterback if there ever was such a thing. You show up every day, you do what it takes to win, and you don't care about personal accolades. You just want to hold the Lombardi Trophy in your hands at the end of the season. The game-managing quarterback should not be looked down upon, but respected. It's an important role and one that can lead to great success for your team and for that quarterback individually. Now, I understand why a lot of people do hate on quarterbacks that we would deem game managers. They aren't Peyton Manning or Brett Favre or Tom Brady or any of those kind of guys. You know, they're not Hall of Famers most likely, especially today. I mean, back in the 60s through the 80s, they would be seen as Hall of Famers because really back then, that's kind of how the quarterback played. You just managed the game, handed it off to the running back. But that's a debate that just has so many different ways that it could go and so many different opinions on it that people have. So I'm not really going to get too deep into that. But I just think that the game managing quarterback should be more respected. Being called a game manager shouldn't be an insult. You're still a good quarterback, and while you can't sling the ball downfield a lot, you can still be a franchise guy. You know, I mean, think about Joe Flacco, Matt Hasselbeck. Those guys played in Seattle and Baltimore for a decently long time and became almost franchise guys. I mean, they had great careers there. So I feel like being a game managing quarterback should be way more respected than it is. It shouldn't be an insult, and I'm not going to use it as an insult. I just think it's a style of play that quarterbacks use sometimes, and they could be very successful using it. So while they're not a great, amazing, Peyton Manning, they're still a good quarterback that can win you a Super Bowl. I'm Limitless Polls. Thank you guys for watching. See you next week.
Never ever will I fold, even if my clothes wrinkle. Big chain single, but this kid'll make a whole me. You don't make the roster, that throw go make my toes.